happy to be here, and hopefully we rejuvenated to begin a new school year. So I'd like to begin with roll call.
Dr. Baker?
Here.
Ms. Chazin? Here. Ms. Gonzalez? Here. Mr. Hightower?
Here.
Dr. Houston? Present. Ms. LaRiviere?
Here.
Ms. Moise? Here. Ms. Patrick? Here. Sister Carol?
Present.
Yeah, well,
And before we ask the people who are here to introduce themselves, I'd like to ask Mr. Ronnie Morris to, where is it, Mr. Ronnie?
There we go.
Who would like to introduce his appointee?
Thank you. So for those I haven't met yet, Ronnie Morris, I serve on Bessie. I represent District 6. District 6 basically runs from Baton Rouge east to Mississippi. So I was advised that I've got an opportunity to appoint someone to this committee. So just a brief background on myself. I actually attended Our Lady Queen of Heaven Elementary School in Lake Charles way back in the dark ages. So I appreciate, what the non-public sector adds to education in Louisiana and appreciate your service. I had the opportunity to work with Mr. Hightower as a junior achievement volunteer whenever he was teaching at Catholic High. So that's how I got to know Mr. Hightower and really appreciate his background and what he brings to the committee here. So just a really brief intro on Brian. He has previous board experience. He served as the student member of the LSU Board of Supervisors in 2003, 2004. He is a Catholic high school graduate, also an LSU graduate, majored in political science, and he also got his law degree from LSU. Practiced law in Baton Rouge. He has experience in workers' compensation, insurance defense, education law, and construction law. So hopefully there's some benefit here to this group with that diversified background. He joined the faculty of Catholic High in 2009, worked as a classroom teacher in several administrative roles. And so I ask you to please welcome Mr. Hightower to the committee today.
Can you give me some tickets to the LSU games?
Should miss that.
I used to get those in my other life.
Yeah, it was a nice
That's
break.
no more. Would like the people who have joined us, I'd like to welcome Dr. Kay Bromley. Is he still here? Okay. Oh, yeah, another meeting. Okay, sorry. I'll start back here.
I'm Shada Sanders. I'm part of the Office of School Choice as a non-public program director. I'm Deetra Gallagher, Director of Nonpublic.
Hi, I'm Nikki Langry, Executive Director of Education Policy, Department of Education.
You had to come. I guess to see if I knew what I was doing.
You see she brought the gavel.
Thomas Rock, member Bessie, Superintendent Jackson, and Dr.
Daphne Flintboyd, State Ombudsman, and Federal Support and Grantee Relations.
Kenya Jenkins, Federal Support and Grantee Relations.
Chauncey McKelvey, Federal Support and Grantee Relations. Tiffany Crawford, the American Federation for Children.
I'm Keith Leger, Department of Education, School Choice Liaison.
Amber Johnson, Deputy Chief of Staff with School Choice. Non-public resides in our office, last year.
Christy Lincoln, Director of Certification.
Thank you all for being here. Okay, the first item on our agenda, looks like we just elected a chair and a vice chair. Must be having senior moments. So we need nomination for chair.
I nominate Anna. I second.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Y'all just don't know, y'all just don't want to do it. It's not easy, but it's okay. As I get older, it gets harder.
You look good.
Thank you. That's why I was in my red today, and I didn't even know it was going to be elections. Nominations open for vice chair.
I nominate Sister Carol.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You accept?
I do, yes, with the honor, glory.
Okay. We have the ex-nun and the real nun, so it might be a good team.
Fallen angel.
Might be a good team. Okay, you should have received your minutes from March. You can think that far back. So do I have a motion to receive the report?
I make the motion.
Sister Carol, second. Dr. Baker. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we move on to new business, consideration of a discussion regarding certification policy. Again, that's Christie. Do I have a motion to receive the report? Dr. Baker, second. Ms. Lisa. All in favor?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
It's been a while. I'm assuming this is already. So today there's quite a few things we want to talk about. I just wanted to start first with kind of the order of how we're going to order our discussion. The first thing I'm going to do is give you some general certification reminders and updates. And then the next thing is I want to start a discussion with you all about some potential educational leadership policy discussion for non-publics. Then also give you an update on updates due to legislation, and then updates, of course, for program entry and completion. So the first piece are just general certification updates and reminders. We've had a couple of BESI meetings since we last presented at this meeting. And the first thing is the geometry add-on endorsement. So back in April, BESI, we proposed policy revisions where we created a geometry add-on endorsement. For those of you that may or may not be aware, that secondary math test is a bit of a beast. And so if you don't teach all of those higher level maths, it can be more complicated to pass. And so in an effort to kind of help to address the math teacher shortage, we created, similar to the algebra endorsement, we created a geometry endorsement. The actual eligibility requirements include them holding a valid standard professional level certificate and then passing that geometry content exam. We adopted that at April BESI. Then after additional conversations with stakeholders and BESI members, we brought it again to June BESI to go ahead and make it emergency rule so that educators and school systems can take advantage of this over the summer so that it can maybe affect their educator workforce for the fall. So the revisions that were adopted at the April BESI were then adopted in June as emergency rules, so they were effective immediately. The next item is Teacher Certification Appeals Council for any of you all who have educators that may have been denied certification by our office that needs to appeal. Wanted to flag for y'all that the next TSAC meeting is September 1st. So the deadline to get those appeals applications into our office is August 4th, which is right there at the beginning of the school year amidst everything else. So just wanted to flag that for y'all to make sure that you are aware. Of course, any educator that does need to appeal, they first have to be denied by our office. They use that denial letter as part of that appeals application. The other reminder is just to keep in mind that all TSAC decisions are final, and that is something that is outlined in law. So once TSAC makes a decision, there's nothing more that we can do anything about it. As another flag, as you're probably aware, this is our peak season for certification. Processing times are increasing. Our staff has decreased. We're trying to aggressively grow those again. We've had some folks retire, all those types of things. Right now we're receiving about 900 applications per week and only have the capacity to process about 525, 550 per week. So we're sliding. Just wanted to flag that for you all in your processing times. We know that's not ideal. It's about 60 business days or 12 to 14 weeks. Some people can't comprehend the business day piece when we speak to educators, so we decided to put it in weeks as well. But we are aware that it's not ideal. We are committed. We have both short-term and long-term solutions in place to try and address that. We are bringing on some temporary folks. We're allowing overtime for our current staff members. The tricky part is it takes about a year to train somebody to do what my specialists do. So we're trying to find things that other people can do for us that will take away the simpler things for the specialists to be able to process more applications. So we just appreciate your patience. If you do need something expedited, of course, schedule a call with us, an office hours call with us, and we can expedite something if you need it in a more timely fashion. Yes, ma'am.
Sister. Yes. My question is, given the situation that you just described to us, Is there any way for a teacher, for example, who sent a check in and it's just sitting there, it gets rejected, and then they have to resubmit another check? Is there a way that you put a little box that says, check number XXX, I've already paid for this, or do they really have to pay another time?
So it really depends on if it's been processed or not. If it's denied, then it's been processed and so that payment has been used. But if it was missing something, then they can use that same payment receipt. We will usually give very specific instructions. It usually depends on what kind of items it's missing, how many, how much processing actually went into it already to get that denial. But generally speaking, we'll give very specific instructions. You can use the same payment receipt, no you can't, kind of thing. And that applies whether we're backlogged or not, basically. So we don't want our educators to have to pay again if, they submitted a complete application. And then the delays as far as processing, there shouldn't be any, we're taking a look at the submission dates, and so there shouldn't be anything that was kicked back that's due to our processing times. It would be due to, other things, incomplete application, that kind of stuff. Any other questions?
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
The mentor teacher waiver for 22-23, has it been posted yet? That application?
That is actually the Believe and Prepare team. I believe it has been. I would reach out to Believe and Prepare at la.gov. I want to say, let's see, we're in July. I want to say that they were shooting for the beginning of July, but.
I think they were shooting for mid-July, but I didn't see it last week, so I just
Yeah,
checked.
okay. But it will be in place for this year, and so as soon as the application is live and ready, then you should be able to apply for that. So the next thing is really the main reason that I wanted to, besides the other legislative updates that we definitely want to provide, but I really wanted to start a discussion with you all for educational leader certification in the non-public setting. The first thing I want to do is just provide some context. When I came on in January of 2019, I was told that was brought to this council before, a discussion was had, and the decision was made not to move forward with anything regarding that. I don't know, I was not a part of that conversation, so I don't know why, don't know, what the context of that conversation was. That's what I was told. But since I've been on, we've received several different applications of folks that move in and out of public school and non-public school, and they may have a certification, but when they go to a non-public, there's no way to maintain it due to the way that laws say they have to renew that certification. And so to try and problem solve some of these scenarios for some of our educators that, want to teach or serve wherever they want to serve, we were just thinking it might be time to start that conversation again about an educational leadership certificate for non-publics. Our initial thoughts, just based on the scenarios that we had, were of a potential solution were to do it very similar to the way that we do the non-public teaching certificate. They meet the same criteria to get issued a level 1 for a teaching certificate, but then if they teach for you all or a non-public for 3 years, then we issue them a level 2 asterisk certificate, which allows them to continue to teach. And the way that they renew that certificate is local personnel evaluations. So we were thinking a similar solution might be that for the ed leader. The criteria to get it to begin with would be the same, but then if they serve for you all at the school level, the problem is with the school level leader. Law requires that to be done via Compass, and of course you all don't use Compass. If they're serving at what would be considered a district or district level equivalent for y'all, then it's not a problem. We can use local personnel evaluations. So we were thinking a solution specifically for those principals, assistant principals, that kind of thing. We thought maybe we can create an asterisk certificate that would allow them to serve and be evaluated with local personnel evaluations. But really just want to start the discussion, get your opinion, get your thoughts. Maybe we need to create a discussion group or a working group or something to problem solve for the certification issue. So any thoughts? I'm happy to.
Okay, I need some clarification.
Sure.
When we're talking about educational leaders, we're talking about principals, and Mr. Rock and I had numerous conversations about that, and we lost 3 legs during that process. The question that I have is, are we going beyond the requirement of the principal beyond building 741 non-public? That all they have to have is a master's degree from some university of something else in basket weaving or something. Are we now saying there's some criteria?
Well, so this would be an option for those that already hold an ed leader, that have already met the regular ones. But if you think we need to have a conversation about something specific for even initial issuance of an ed leader one in the non-public setting, happy to have those discussions as well. That's kind of why I wanted to bring it as a discussion, to see what you all feel is the real problem, and hear what you think potential solutions might be, so that we can see what is allowable.
It seems like
We're
the
here to
problem-
serve, so, you know.
It seems like the problem that you're talking about is trying to maintain the certification for someone who moves in and out of the public and private system.
Correct, that's what we saw.
I don't foresee a problem within our own system the way that we have it right now. So I don't think there's a problem there to solve, at least from my viewpoint. In my association of independent schools, we have independent schools, there's 90 some odd of us across the Southwest, and several of those are led, at my position, head of school position, by people who only hold a bachelor's. So, you know, I'm always for a little bit less regulation in that to give us the freedom to do it, but I can understand having a mechanism to solve that problem as well. So I think that's a valid thing.
And I think, I would agree with Dr. Baker, because I think especially like in my diocese, it's part of our minimum qualifications and preference for any DL1. So we are looking to have ours. So it's not just for those people who flow in and out. We have both scenarios. A new principal who's coming in that we want to have an EDL1 for, and then the principal who maybe served in capacity at a public school and then comes in after retirement and does our transition. So I do think a working group is necessary. I don't recall any conversations in 2019 at any length.
I don't remember that, but I know in our group that Tommy led, we talked about some requirements for principals. And it was around that same time we decided to dismiss that at this time.
And that may be the conversation that I was
Could be.
informed of. Like I said, I didn't participate, so I really don't know.
Could be, but I honestly think something has to happen sooner rather than later, because I have some principals who are extremely upset and agitated about the fact that they cannot renew their EL2, but they're working very hard to make sure all their teacher certifications are renewed.
Right.
And it's kind of like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth, in our district office.
We get those kind of comments and questions all the time. That's kind of what prompted the discussion. So, any other thoughts? Anybody want to volunteer for the working group? Okay. Any other discussion or thoughts, or anybody that would like to participate?
Privates.
So right now,
I mean, we do want to have representation from
Yeah.
the mix, you know.
I'll,
Thank you, Paul.
you're welcome.
So my question right now in the immediate is, we place those EDLs in non-practicing status right now?
That's the only option we have in policy right now. It's not ideal. It's the verbiage, you know, and people don't want to see that on their certificate if they're actually serving.
Right.
And so that's why we want to create some sort of solution for them. Okay, so we have 4. I have a question about that. Since these 4, isn't there like a minimum where we can or can't have this 4 the appropriate number, Ashley?
No, we don't want to reach it for
Where it's not,
Right.
is that good?
Okay, Brandy,
I'm sorry, I'll get your call.
Oh, well, excuse me.
Do you need one
So
more?
we need
We
somebody.
want to make sure that we have enough, but not too much.
I would like some representation from my office, Michael Beers.
Okay. How many actually is,
How many can you have?
that's what I'm asking, I'm not exactly sure. Because I know there's some rules
I didn't raise
about
my hand, but I'm coming.
not having,
What's the full, you have enrollment?
Right now it says.
11.
11.
No, then it's good.
So yes, you're good.
okay, so we're good with 5, okay. So let's,
Not more than 11?
If you can have people in a work group that are not from this or not
Right.
designees of these.
this particular
as well.
board, so if you, like, so you're saying if they want to choose some other representation from their school that's not a member, we can do that?
Right, and it doesn't just have to be representation, it could be other non-publics.
Yeah,
That's what I heard, Tom. That's
So can we confirm the volunteers that we do have, just to be sure? Okay. Okay. Shannon, can you write that one, since you have a pen, I'm not bringing one up here, thank you.
And we may, once it crosses that high, maybe they could request somebody else from their organization.
From their organization, so that we don't have a quorum. Good, I'm excited. We know that everybody is busy. We will, do this with consideration of calendars and, the start of school won't be something that we started at, those kinds of things. But we'll try and get some meetings in the books and see what we can do for our educators. Great. All right, so the next piece is about legislative changes. Many of you are probably aware of all the things that are related to education that were proposed this past legislative session. Some of the things specific to teacher certification involve Praxis 1 core, involve master's degrees, involve out-of-state reciprocity, criminal history checks for certification. A lot of those, we're still figuring out all the details to align with those laws. We do have an update on probably the hottest topic of that list, which is the Praxis 1 core. For those of you that do require certification, therefore entrance into a teacher preparation program, the Praxis 1 core update, we just received an update last week. So just to back up a little bit, BESI policy can be more restrictive than the law, just not less restrictive. So right now, well, prior to the 14th, BESI policy was still in effect. And so for the certification office, we have to follow BESI policy. Well, on the 14th, last week, President Garvey signed a waiver of BESI policy in regards to the teacher preparation piece. It's so that those folks can enroll and schedule candidates into courses. They're probably going to have to set up more courses, more professors, those types of things. And so there's no delay for that. In enrolling into a teacher preparation program, President Garvey signed a waiver specific to the requirements of Praxis 1 core for entrance into a teacher preparation program. Along with that, it was for the certificates that are related to entrance into a teacher preparation program. So right now, we don't have a waiver for initial certification. We are bringing additional policy recommendations based on these two acts listed here to BESI in August, and we will see how that goes and what that ends up like in August. The specific pieces, you can see parts of the waiver here. These are the spots in the bulletins that specifically speak to what is being waived. So if you look at 996, 743, and 745, those are the two pieces that require the Praxis 1 core for entrance into a teacher preparation program, whether it's traditional or alternate certification. And then you see in Bulletin 746, Section 515 and 535, those are the pieces related to the certificates specific to enrollment in those teacher preparation programs. So the resident certificate, or the R, and the practitioner or PL license will no longer be required for issuance of either of those certificates, nor for entrance into a program, of course. So one thing to note, it's only removing the Praxis for the passage of a test that is the Praxis 1 core that's required prior to entering the program and while actually being enrolled in that program. It does not waive the current requirement for the core academic skills test that is required at completion of the teacher preparation program. Again, we are going to bring policy for BESI to consider for that in August. This waiver, or these waivers, will be in effect from the date of the signature, which was last week on the 14th, until those policy revisions are considered. And we're going to propose them as emergency rule, notice of intent, emergency rule at the August 24th BESI meeting. Of course, it's all subject to the ratification of the board. So what does that mean for certification? It gets a little tricky. So I kind of put on this slide here when you do and when you don't, and what you need and don't need. A lot of the folks out there kind of got confused, it's spread like wildfire, oh, Praxis is waived. Well, they think that all Praxis is waived. That's not really the case. So just wanted to outline here, Praxis Core is not required for issuance of a resident certificate, but if you renew a resident certificate, the Praxis content is required. Praxis Core is not required for initial issuance of a practitioner's license or a PL, but the content Praxis is required to issue that PL. So they still need their content. If they're going to be trained as a math teacher and are entering into an alt-cert program, they have to have that math content exam to be able to get that PL and to get into the program. Where it gets a little tricky is the TAT. So the TAT policy was not waived. So Praxis Core reading and writing is still required for issuance of the initial TAT, or the temporary authority to teach, for any of those schools that use that. Now, when it comes to the renewal of the TAT, that policy is worded, you need 2 attempts at all exams required for the entrance into a teacher preparation program since the last issuance or renewal of the TAT. So for the TAT renewal, if they've already taken the reading and writing, they don't need to take that math portion of the Praxis 1, they only have to take the content exams twice. So that's where it gets a little tricky, where it applies to TAT, but not really applies to TAT, it only applies to TAT renewal, because of the way that that policy was worded. If you have any questions, of course, submit a question in our online portal, email certification@la.gov. Those questions are actually answered much quicker than our applications, because those take longer. We're usually responding to questions within a day or 2. Any questions here?
This one?
All right, so some other pieces that are related to legislation are some literacy updates that we actually brought into Bessie. Those revisions were, those policy revisions were approved to align with the literacy requirements that were passed in the previous legislative session. To allow teacher preparation providers and our partner ETS to get some things in place, these literacy updates actually have a future effective date. It's also so that our candidates that are currently enrolled don't have to meet some new requirements that weren't a part of their initial program. So some of those updates include updating the adoption of a new teaching reading exam. That new teaching reading exam aligns with our updated literacy competencies that are the science of reading. We are also specifying the type of reading coursework that's required to align with the science of reading competencies. And then we included the adoption of the science of reading training as an option to meet certification requirements for some teacher candidates. It's all in alignment with how they were prepared to align with another law that specifies literacy requirements. We are working with ETS, which is Educational Testing Services, the nonprofit that does Praxis. They administer Praxis exams. We're working with them to try and get a teaching of reading exam developed as a part of our elementary multiple subjects exam to align with some specific requirements both from last legislative session and this past legislative session, so that it's not an additional test. So we'll likely bring some additional policy revisions prior to the actual effective date of this particular piece of policy. Just wanted to give you all a heads up that it's coming. It was adopted, but there will be some changes. In the meantime, the more broad interpretation of the law regarding literacy teaching reading will be used. So that means for traditional program completers, they have to use semester hours, 3, 6, or 9 semester hours of reading coursework to meet this requirement. If they complete an alt-cert program, which could be university or it could be private provider, we're looking either for the semester hours or in addition to the semester hours for the alt-cert program completers, we have the option of using that teaching reading exam, or they can attest to completing those, meeting those competencies via a contact hour equivalent. So, and then eventually they'll be able to do that science of reading training for those alt-cert candidates. So if you have a candidate, ULM I think is the only one, and this may not be applicable to you only if you have a candidate that's enrolled in a program, but wanted to provide it to you nonetheless. If a university actually doesn't provide the semester hours, then they have to, there's a particular form that they have to attest to with the contact hours for the reading requirements. And just keep in mind that reading requirements are outlined in law, so it's applicable not only to initial certification, but also additional like add-on endorsements. So that's not something we're really in the position to waive. That's really the only updates that I have for you all. Are there any questions, any comments? Any clarification needed? It's a lot. If you have any or you think of any, please feel free to email certification@la.gov or to ask a question in our online portal. We'll be happy to answer you.
Any further discussion? Any opposition? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we will be hearing from who?
Yes, I'll be reaching out. I'll make sure with Shannon that I have everybody's email. I'm pretty sure that I do. We'll get that list and we'll at least get a first tentative date set, and we can set some dates after that first meeting so that we can accommodate everybody's calendars.
Will that be in person meeting or also by Zoom?
If there's no requirements that we have to do it one way or the other, I don't see why we couldn't do it either way. Do you have a preference?
I would think in person might be better the first time.
Okay.
I mean, that way we don't have to,
We are completely open to your preference if there's no other meeting.
we don't have to be in our pajamas, we can come to that.
I don't know, might be a fashion show.
Tommy Ross will take us out to lunch.
All right.
With his Bessie credit card. Mr. Morris, you can come with us and you can use yours too. You can buy the dessert. Okay, moving on, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 741. Who's addressing that? I know. We need to, I need a motion to receive the report. Lisa, second, Mr. Hightower. Good morning.
My name is Ashley Townsend. I work in the Office of Governmental Administrative and Public Affairs, and I'm glad to be here with you today to talk a little bit about continuous learning. So a little bit of context for why we're talking about this today. The Continuous Learning Task Force was created by a Senate concurrent resolution in 2020, and they spent 4 meetings in 2021 talking about continuous learning, which we all perhaps unwillingly became experts on very quickly. I know some of you probably know more than you want to know about continuous learning at this point, but our goal was to look at where Louisiana is for continuous learning, our capabilities, where we compare with the rest of the nation, and what changes need to be made to make sure that we're prepared for whatever, because now we know whatever sometimes is possible. So looking at this, there is a Continuous Learning Task Force report, and it's linked in the deck. It's available on Board Docs. If you can't find it any other way, let us know and we can get it to you. If you haven't seen it yet, the Continuous Learning Task Force report identified 4 key areas of continuous learning: family engagement and support, instructional quality, system and school planning, and technology. They gave many recommendations for how we as Louisianians could better prepare to make sure that we're ready to engage in continuous learning if and when we ever need to again. We're going to look specifically today at policy recommendations. There were 4 key policy recommendations that were outlined in that Continuous Learning Task Force report. Number 1, they recommended that we embed continuous learning planning within our statewide educational technology plan. That task has been completed. The new plan was released in March of this year, and I'll also have it linked there on the deck when you receive it electronically if you haven't had a chance to review that yet. The second policy recommendation is that BESI promulgate rules to require that LEAs develop their own local continuous learning plans. They asked that we include in that policy that those plans be reviewed by stakeholders, updated annually, and submitted to the state, and that the state be notified when continuous learning is initiated. Again, these were the recommendations of the task force. The third recommendation is that we review policy for needed updates related to continuous learning. And the fourth is that we require that instructional standards and expectations be maintained during continuous learning. So we'll look at the ways in which those recommendations are being implemented. First of all, as I mentioned, those updates have been made to the statewide educational technology plan. Second, we'll look at the policy that we're planning to bring to Betsy in August related to the continuous learning plans locally developed. We'll also look at some policy that we're bringing to address other issues that have arisen as we begin looking at this continuous learning issue. And then we'll talk very briefly about instructional quality and how we can ensure that that is maintained. So we're going to bring this policy to Betsy in August, and this is a piece that we're planning to recommend for Bulletin 741 non-public. Again, the request of the Continuous Learning Task Force is up here on the right. We elected not to require that these plans be submitted to the state, but rather we're going to ask that the plans just be posted to your website so that your own stakeholders can view them, so that they can understand your expectations if and when that becomes an issue again. And then we're going to recommend that these plans address technology and connectivity, student and staff responsibilities, attendance, family strategic communication, engagement, and support, and instructional quality. So again, these are some of those key issues that the task force brought up as important components of continuous learning that we'll ask local schools, district systems to address and just think about. When you're thinking about if school shuts down and we have to revert to some form of modified operations in response to any kind of situation, here are just some basic things that are reasonable to think about and plan for. To help with this, the department released a continuous learning toolkit in May. And this document, it's 8 or so pages, but there are a ton of hyperlinks in there to all kinds of resources, things from around the nation, best practices that are emerging as this is still emerging. Just whatever kind of resources that we could think of to put in there to help you in developing those plans. The toolkit is linked later in the deck as well. And if, as you review that toolkit, if you think of anything else that would be helpful to districts or helpful to you as you put together these plans, we would love to know that because we really do want this to be kind of a one-stop shop for people to be able to use when they're thinking about their own continuous learning plans. Are there any thoughts, comments, questions, concerns about just this ask of including a locally developed continuous learning plan?
When will this be put into 741?
This will be recommended to the board in August. And we did put a date. I'm interested in your thoughts on this date. We were asked to include just a date annually when we could expect these plans to be available. We put June 30th. We thought that was reasonable as you're looking at closing out the school year, things that went well, things to improve, summer training that might be needed. So we thought June 30th would be a reasonable ask for when those might be on websites, and then thoughts there, okay?
Just curious about the posting to the website. As long as we're sharing it with our stakeholders, with our school community, why do we have to put it on our website?
That seemed to be the most accessible way that we could tell people, oh, you're not sure what your district's plan is, it should be on their website, check it out. That seemed to be the easiest way that we could facilitate communication and direct
So I won't have a
people.
system-wide plan. My schools have individual plans. So I won't post 70 plans on my website for my system. So we always direct our parents to ask their individual schools for their school-specific information.
Would it be reasonable that that would be on their school website somewhere?
I mean, it could be, but I don't want to commit to that on their behalf. I think for me, as long as they're sharing it with their stakeholders in the community, however they choose to share it, whether it's through their portal, their school information system, whatever they use for the parent portal, their handbook, and all of our handbooks are not posted on our websites. So I would ask the question, does it have to be posted on the website? Can we say something like communicated or disseminated to all stakeholders?
Thoughts there? I'm very open to.
Seems like language by the reasonably accepted method for each school, right? Is what you're
Yes,
saying? So if they
yes,
don't normally
yes.
use a website,
Right.
if they use a handbook or a publication to parents.
Correct.
And just evidence that it's been
That
communicated to our
evidence that's been
stakeholders.
communicated.
Yes,
That's important.
Communication.
evidence of communication with your
Yes.
stakeholders.
Yeah, because that's what we did with COVID, where we had
Yes.
to post that on our website.
Yes.
So it would be the same process.
That makes sense. Thoughts there, if we word it in such a way as it's something like evidence that the plan has been communicated to stakeholders. That would be
Yes.
reasonable.
I would agree.
I think that would be, for me, knowing the variety of schools that I have and the variety of ways they communicate with their parents
and their families and other stakeholders, that would be better for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts there? So moving along, we found a couple of areas that arose of needing attention when we're thinking about continuous learning. One is the idea of taking attendance. So checking attendance is in statute, but it had just never been put in policy. So we're going to go ahead and say we should check attendance, as I'm sure we all do already because it is in statute. We're just going to put that in policy. We're also doing a little renumbering in that section because there was this very weird, not the way my English teacher taught me to write out loud. There was a B1, there was not a B and then a 1, it was just B1, so we're gonna fix that. And then we'll go ahead and get that mandatory kindergarten with the dates that were approved in the bill this year. We'll take care of that because it's in that same section while we're there. And then the next thing that we're tackling here is this idea of remote instruction. This was a little bit of a bigger undertaking. So we're attempting to define remote instruction there. We'll attempt to define hybrid instruction. And then our goal was to set some baselines for what student attendance would look like during remote instruction to serve as a foundation for you to create your own expectations for student attendance. And our thoughts behind this is that there are so many different needs, abilities, connectivity, like capabilities in different parts of the state and among different schools. We really wanted to make sure that you all had the autonomy to set your own expectations for what does remote attendance look like here. And so what we're going to ask is that we just include that attendance is checked and reported on each school day at the beginning of each class period. That's the language from the statute. And then we thought it was reasonable to require that at least one of the following be met. Either the student logs into a synchronous online instruction at the designated time, or evidence exists that the student accessed a planned asynchronous instructional activity. Acknowledging that both synchronous and asynchronous instruction does exist, not always exclusively in the same program or in the same class, because sometimes you switch back and forth in a class. But we would ask that you all just kind of start with that and then build up whatever expectations make the most sense for you. Thoughts there? We also are looking at some applicability and communication. So this would be for students who are enrolled in a typically on-site course, but one that has transitioned to remote temporarily because of continuous learning, because the school site isn't accessible for whatever reason. You could also use this to extend to students who these individual students aren't able to attend in person for a time. And then we'll ask that the attendance and the expectations be communicated in your policy. And we thought it would be wise to communicate that in that policy at the beginning of the year through the handbook or however you do. And then if you do transition to remote instruction, communicate that policy again. Remember, this is what we said at the beginning of the year were our expectations. Should the situation arise, we're transitioning to this now. Remember, here's what we said we expected. So any thoughts there? We also had the idea at Teacher Leader Summit next year to host a roundtable of system leaders to share some best practices and some findings that they've encountered in developing their own local policies, because there are a lot of different ways that you could go with this. So we thought that after everyone has a chance to tackle this locally, maybe you all would like to come together as leaders to just review what you found and where you've landed and some other issues and concerns that may have arisen during the year. So we'll look to do that next year at the Teacher Leader Summit as well. And then thinking about instructional qualities, we really talk a lot about what should be required versus what should be encouraged when it comes to maintaining instructional quality. Of course, we want to make sure that students are held to those same high standards that we expect throughout the rest of the year. But what we've heard from most people so far is just that we trust them to maintain instructional quality, that you all will find the best ways to do that in your own schools and systems, that we trust you to do that, and that you all would be willing maybe to share best practices with each other as we develop what is still very new consideration. So, thoughts there? Anything else that would make sense to require versus just encouraging? And there are resources there in that continuous learning toolkit to share instructional practices for remote, ways to do virtual walkthroughs like you would do in-person walkthroughs in a class, things like that. So
I know some people suggested doing a beginning of the year continuous learning drill, like you would do a fire drill or a tornado drill, but a continuous learning drill. Or even just incorporating technology and remote style instruction while you're there in the classroom to make sure the students know how to log in, to make sure the parents know how to access things from their end, things like that at the beginning of the year. But those are all issues or just ideas that you may decide to incorporate locally, and then we may have some best practices that emerge from that. All right, any questions, concerns, thoughts?
I have a question in regard to the section on mandatory kindergarten. And I asked this question last time, I asked it again. I have a daycare, all right, with all the daycare license and all the daycare expectations, you graduated from high school, okay? We're licensed to up to age 5 or 6 for kindergarten. Are the requirements for a mandatory kindergarten teacher the same as it is in my regular school, my non-public school? They have to have a degree, have to have certification, has that changed, or what happens?
They did address that in this bill. If you like, I can email you. I think I can get your email from Shannon maybe, and I can just make sure we look at any different variations of that question you may have, because that's a good one.
Well, the big difference is education level, attendance level. Or
Certified teacher, how is that possible to have a daycare with 5-year-olds attending and you have a non-certified teacher if it's mandatory by Bessie?
Right.
That definitely needs to be addressed.
Right, for sure. Okay. Yeah, well, I'll chat about that, and we can maybe we can get together a list of those specific questions we wanted to read for that. Yeah, thank you.
We renamed it Bridge, but I don't like it, and I think it needs, I think it's an oversight.
Right.
But as I delve into this program, whatever guidance you can put.
Sure, yes ma'am. Happy to do that. Anything else?
Have you been privy to discussion, or I guess seen issues maybe where parents or students were choosing to Zoom in or learn remotely, and really the reason, we tried looking that up because this is what started happening with us. For the most part, we have very few attendance problems. Students want to be at school, but we started seeing a pattern either with students involved in club sports who may be leaving on Friday for club volleyball. I would just Zoom into my classes so they weren't missing anything. Or we had a couple gamers who figured out I can game all day and Zoom in and pretend I'm at school. So is there in some of the public systems criterion, like you can only Zoom in if you're quarantining or if there's a note from a physician?
I think there are people who have found that same thing, that they need to set some expectation for when you can self-quarantine, I guess, is what's important. And so yeah, I think that's very reasonable to set your own expectations for that. We also put a link in that toolkit to one of the virtual charter schools attendance policies, because their policy, it addresses logging in at this time, but it goes into participation and what level of effort is documentable as well too. So that might be something that would be useful as I should have finished that.
But wouldn't that come up in the discussions about attendance? What is attendance and when is a virtual attendance allowed? Is that something that you guys have discussed?
We decided not to put those requirements here, but rather to leave that to you also. We're defining remote attendance is this right here, and then in the policy, it actually will say that the LEAs, the local schools and systems, are to set their own, what does accessing an asynchronous activity look like? Is it just the completion of an IXL skill, or is it achieving a mastery percentage on a certain activity or something like that? So you all will be free to do that based on what kinds of programs you're using.
I appreciate that freedom. It's important, I think. It's difficult though. I think all of our schools have run into that same issue, and several of my colleagues' schools have had very flexible programs, and kids have taken advantage of it. We basically said, nope, unless you're out for COVID, you cannot Zoom into a class. Now, we've made exception here and there, but the standing rule was that.
And technically, if they're quarantined due to an illness or an injury, it's an excused absence.
Yeah.
But maybe a virtual is an opportunity to count that as a remote presence instead of an excused absence, but with those requirements that you would have in place. So those are things that would definitely be smart. All right, well, please reach out if you have any questions or if I can be of help in any way. Thank you so much for your time.
Further discussion? Any opposition? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, consideration of update report regarding the Louisiana Scholarship Program. I need a motion to receive the report. Dr. Houston, second by Ms. Cadell.
Good morning, I'm Deetra Golden, Director of Nonpublic with the Office of School Choice. So this morning I'll be talking to you about the Louisiana Scholarship Program and the updates that we have coming up for the 2022-2023 school year. On today's agenda, we'll talk about the application data and the outcome of improvements, Louisiana Scholarship Program, the School Choice Program, school year 2022-2023 planning, and the non-public school reporting. Okay, so here's an outline of the Louisiana Scholarship Program application timeline. I'm happy to say we are far ahead of all the deadlines that we have set thus far for this program. Our transfer window was open from June 15th and it just closed on July 18th. It will open again on August 1st. So if any of the schools, if you all are worried about transfers, everything that has been submitted thus far, we have already entered them in the system. Rousters, they all should be available in our Leads portal so that the schools can review them. And any transfers we receive after July 18th, those will start being entered into the system on August the 1st. So for the 2022-2023 year, we had total applications of 8,796. We had 7,497 eligible applicants. New applications was 2,864. We had a total new in the LSP program. So some of our improvements for the 2022-2023 school year. So we are invested in accurate data early. By doing that, we ran mock lotteries to get accurate predictions using historical data. We were able to determine that we could offer all awards based on data models. The next point was making sure that all students were eligible as quick as we possibly could. We partnered with the Louisiana Federation of Children. They assisted us, and we're very thankful for that. We also had parent webinars. We're going to have parent webinars, and we're helping parents to better understand the Louisiana process. So we are creating webinars for them as well so that they can ask any questions. We're getting literature out as quick as we possibly can to the schools via email, webinars, our non-public newsletter. Increased school support. We are creating office hours for eligibility certification. We are doing monthly school webinars, increased and more detailed guidance, and email response rate of less than 48 hours whenever we receive an email from a school. Next, I know that you all have seen this before, and this is just a model of how you determine if a student is eligible to receive an award. So we just wanted to include this again just for your review, but I know that we've already discussed that previously, and all the students have already been awarded for this upcoming school year. Next, our school choice program application update. For the school choice program, applications opened on July 31st. They closed on March 7th. January 31st. Applications closed on March 7th. Schools were notified of awards on May 6th, and parent notification letters were all sent out on May 9th. So, we had about 616 total applications, and within that 16, that includes 30 incomplete applications. We had 466 awards offered. We had 23 declined awards. We have 120 students on our wait list. So we have 443 total current of awarded students. Okay? So at the bottom, we have a note here, currently reviewing awards and funding to determine how many students can be awarded off the wait list. You all know we have funding restrictions, So we're not sure how many more we can possibly award, but we have a few awards that we will be able to make. We haven't hammered down on that exact number yet, but we have a few more that will be awarded. So the school year planning for this upcoming school year. So first, we're going to increase transparency and support. Prior to the start of the school year, the following will be made. We will update our scholarship participation guide that is already in progress. We have created a family participation guide. We have combined 2 documents that was currently on our website that will be combined into one document. A comprehensive reporting calendar that will be sent out to all schools. It will give them a review of the full year so that they will know all of their deadlines going forward, and it won't be something that they have to wait on. Additional resources and information on the LDOE website. Everything that we have will be put on our website, as well as it will be pushed out to schools via email, via our webinar, via our weekly newsletter. Everything that they would possibly need will be in there. And we also send out email reminders constantly, reminding them of any deadlines that they may possibly have. Also, we will be developing a systems manual. That manual will include guidelines for our FTP, as well as guidelines to how to use the LEAD systems for any new staff members you all may have, and for some of the old ones that's there as well. Office hours will be expanded for school support. That went over very well with our schools, so we went ahead and extended our office hours as well as our days to include, to give them more options where they can come and they can ask that special question that they want to ask and not feel rushed or on a webinar in the middle of it and they want to ask a question. We give them that individualized time. We will have bi-weekly check-ins with new schools and schools needing extra support. So we have a new school that's coming to us. We will be providing direct support to them, as well as some of our existing schools. We have some of our schools out there that they still need that extra support from us. So we're going to provide some support to them as well to try to make their year a little bit more smoother. Also, webinar training for application process, a school annual survey for program improvements. We have created a survey that we're going to send out to our schools so that they can tell us what's needed, what needs to be changed, what we need to do different, and also give us some positive feedback as well. And we have received that verbally, but sometimes it looks really good to see it written on paper in black and white so that we can pass it up the chain. Next, we're going to update our school contact list and system access list. I know in your schools you have a lot of people that has access to leads that is no longer with you all. We have some people that has access and they're using the incorrect access. So we're trying to get all that straightened out and streamlined. We want to make sure that we have the correct address, telephone number, email address, because we want to make sure that all of our correspondence is getting to the proper people that we need it to get to, because we want to make sure that all of our deadlines are met in a very timely manner. Next, other program improvements. We're going to focus areas to improve transparency and accountability. We want to look more at our mobility rate, our testing rates and errors. We want to look at, again, timely reporting, audit findings, transfer and expulsion rates. So I just want to back up a minute to timely reporting. It is very, very, very important that our deadlines are met that we're setting. If those deadlines are not met, it trickles down and it stops a lot of other deadlines that we have to change, and it stops a lot of stuff. So we try to make sure that we pad our deadline dates. Sometimes we give it to you all a little bit early to make sure that, because normally we always have to chase. So we're trying to get out of that chasing business. So we try to just give you the deadlines ahead of time so we can get that information that we need. So it's not going to get better?
We hope. We hope.
Okay. All right. Areas to add to transparency and accountability. We're now doing site visits. So we're not sure just yet how many schools we will be able to visit, but between Ishana and I, some of the schools will see us. I'm not sure we're just gonna put them in the hat and visit those schools, or if we may do some of our problem schools, but we also want to go and see our schools that's thriving and doing great. Guide with application guidance and additional resources and information on participating schools to inform families of various choices of all the different schools schools. So on the Louisiana Believes website, there will be a list uploaded by Friday of all of our participating schools, so that if a parent wants to transfer, they can look on our Louisiana Believes website, because we want to start directing them there more, as well as the schools, because everything the school may possibly need or the families may possibly need is on that website. So they should be able to go there and get whatever they need. Okay? So, and I also want to talk again about that application for all families. We're going to demo that to make sure that we go in as a parent, filling it out to make sure that it's easy to use. I know it's going to be kind of different for our Orleans people, because they are used to having 2 different sites, but we're going to work through that. So we're going to try to do all the advertising we possibly can, and I know Louisiana Federation of Children, they'll get the word out for us, as well as the schools, so we're going to work through that. But we have our fingers crossed that is going to be great. All right, any questions?
Just want to thank you and your team. It's come a long way.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You all are fabulous. We are so grateful.
Want to come work for me?
Thank you. Tamara, TJ is trying to take us.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on this item, or any opposition? So are you doing the next one?
Yes.
Consideration of an update reporting the portfolio opportunities. I need a motion to receive the report. Mr. Carroll, Ms. Chasson.
Okay.
Okay.
You.
You double do.
All right, we're done doing today. Okay, we're going to go on to our portfolio opportunities update. So our agenda for this particular slide will be non-public school reporting and sponsor site changes. So for the 2022-2023 school year, non-public school enrollment reporting would take place in an improved system through EdLink. While I'm thinking about it, the most updated list for our NPS schools, it has already been added to our website. So you should be able to see it out there. So it is a work in progress. As we receive updates, we will make sure that that list is updated as well. So another department handles that now, but I still have my hands in it. So as soon as I receive an update, I get with Ms. Wood so that we can make sure that it is updated in a very timely manner, and we will make sure that our federal programs have the most updated list. Okay? So we're also going to increase data quality and accessibility of information through guidance and importance of timely reporting, because as I stated, the federal programs, they need enrollment data for state and federal funding. So we want to try to make sure that whenever we open the portal for all of our NPS schools to report, which will be early September and it'll close early October, it is very important that every school reports in that time frame. Because if not, as I stated, it throws off it throws off everything. So we have to make sure. So we built in time so we can chase 380 some schools to make sure that we get them to report in a very timely manner.
This is the annual state report that they
Yes. Okay, also let's talk about sponsor site changes. A lot of times we don't find out a school is closing until everybody else finds it out. So we need to find a way to drill that down. So this sponsor site form, it has been pushed out by another department, but if the school has an address change, a school leader change, if the superintendent changes, any grade level changes, if they plan on opening, if they plan on closing, that link can be found here on this PowerPoint. And it has also already been pushed out to all of our schools. So it's out there. So please encourage them that if they need to make any changes, do it via.
What did that come through with?
It's probably been about.
I think we done it through email, we did it.
It's probably been about 2-3 weeks.
I'm through a monthly webinar, yeah.
I don't remember, but I saw it.
We'll resend it.
Yeah, could you resend it?
Letter to, that's helpful.
Yes.
Because I tried a while back, and I couldn't maneuver it because I was trying to change the principles.
Okay, it's real easy now.
They've updated it since then, probably, yeah.
So a moron can do it. I can.
Give us a call.
But I'll make sure to include it in this week's newsletter.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks.
Is that that job the one we're talking about?
Yeah,
Yes.
but it's been upgraded.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I was trying to do the same thing. There's a link that's change of information, or when you click it, it's not active, so.
Okay, it's been upgraded. It's been updated. We're gonna send it, about to send it right now, so it'll be sitting there. Okay, we'll check it in. She's trying to access it in back, see if we can get to it. But yeah, this is a very important document. We really need this updated. So if you all have any changes, just do it there and we'll get everything taken care of.
Can I just ask real quick, when we do those changes, does that go to, does the department have that in every department?
Well, it goes to, go ahead.
Because there are different departments, as you well know. But then, do they have the correct information?
Yes, this document is shared, and so the people that normally keep this information updated, it comes to us as well.
Because I have principals that have been gone for probably 5 or 10 years, and they're still
getting the information.
Yeah.
Yes, and I know when you all get back for our monthly call that's coming up, we also changed it for the upcoming school year, because it was going to a lot of people that no longer wants to receive it. So we updated that link with the current email addresses that we have for everyone that we know want to be on that call, or that needs to be on that call. So that has been sent out. So when you get there, you may see a cancellation, and then because we wanted to cancel the old one, and we sent out a new one. Okay, so.
That's why I got the cancellation and then the new one.
Yes. So you all know you can reach us at any time via email or through our personal email addresses. We are there. Just let us know if there's anything that we can possibly do to assist, make things easier, make things better. You know, Ishana and I, we're open for our suggestions.
And
we just want things to run
as an
smoothly.
example, we got an email from Required Services. I don't assume that my principals get everything, so I send it again. Well, then I started getting emails from my principal saying I didn't get it. So I emailed the lady back, and she said, oh, well, we didn't send it to the principal. Because they didn't have the correct list, I guess. But that was just like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and I didn't receive on the email. And I didn't receive that email at all. I wasn't even on the distribution list. So if you hadn't flagged
Yeah,
it.
so you're saying that that's all upgraded, I mean, that's all current right now, of what you have?
I'm going to be releasing on our monthly call tomorrow, updated form for people to complete their contact list and things. So
Okay.
upgraded.
Okay. We have a call tomorrow?
Yes.
At 5 o'clock?
2 o'clock. 2 o'clock.
5 o'clock somewhere.
I just want to also please encourage all your students to please review those newsletters. We're getting less than 50% of people that's clicking on that newsletter. So we really, there's a lot of information.
I hate to tell you, but my principals will read your newsletter before they read mine.
That's good.
So what? Okay, that's why I said, you wanna come work for me?
Okay.
Okay, so that information will be on that webinar tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Any further discussion? Any opposition? Thanks very
All right,
much.
thank you.
Okay, our last item, I guess we saved the best for last. Consideration of an update provided by Ms. Daphne. I need a motion to receive the report. Lisa, and second by Dr. Baker.
Well, hello,
Good
everybody.
morning.
Good morning.
It's great to see everyone.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay. What we're looking at today is just a reminder and also letting you know that the LEAs will be asking our non-public schools to really do a little more tweaking with Title IV. If anyone needs to reach out to me regarding it, you know that they can, and I don't mind helping them with it. But here's what's going on. Title IV definitely is requesting on that needs assessment that these activities are evidence-based, research-based strategies, programs, and activities. Now, we know at first when Title IV came out, everything was supposed to be evidence-based. But if you look at the definition of evidence-based compared to the definition of research-based, evidence-based means everything has been tried and tested, and no matter what, this is a foolproof system, whereas research-based sounds great, but not all of the components of that program or that strategy have really been looked at and vested. But what we do now know and realize is that these are the two
that tend to provide more academic achievement and teacher effectiveness. So we are wanting our schools to use these two particular strategies, programs, and activities that are evidence or research-based. Also, you're going to see where we're going to give you also a site where they can go and get this information. When they are doing their needs assessment, we really do need them to pay close attention in their program descriptions or objectives, stating the purpose, the activities to reach those objectives and programming, but also the outcomes. What is the expected outcome for doing arts across the classroom or music within the school curriculum? What outcome are you expecting to see based on this? If justification and clarification is needed, you feel like you need to justify something, then do so. But also know that the LEAs may ask for that as well. We need to state the measures of effectiveness through data, evaluation, survey results, or it could be just a quick sampling of a project that kids were doing. Why is this important? It is important for us to be able to show, and the LEAs as well, when they are doing their evaluations of Titles 2 and 4, that yes, we are asking our non-public schools to also have a measure of effectiveness. And you do it anyway in your school plans. You want to know at the end of the year what's been successful, what worked, what didn't, and what are you going to do to make those changes and improvements. In addition, the LEAs and some private schools are already using these Smarty Goals. But basically, what we're asking is it specific, measurable, is it ambitious, relevant, time-bound, inclusive, and equitable? As they go through this, you'll see different changes of and variations of Smarty Goals. But these are the basic ones. And it's just very important to use when you are planning your curriculum for the year or your school plan, if that's what you call it, because it aligns everything and makes sure it's succinct and that it flows through from the objectives to the ending of the evaluation and measurement. These are resources for you. The Title IV Part A Center is a wonderful site. Please use it. You can get a lot of information. You can also join webinars. You can even have it set up where you can make contact with somebody from Ed who will reach out to you. Also, that is the guidance portion. And as I stated, clarifying the difference between research-based as well as evidence. Any questions? Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any opposition?
I have a question about Eames.
I'll get you go.
Yes, you want to go first?
Go ahead, I was gonna bring it up. Go ahead.
Daphne, if there are unused Eames funding, is it possible for us to request that those funds be reverted to GEARS and be restricted to non-public schools, as that was the original intention of the funding?
And I'm going to ask that because it is overheat, and we have had that question before.
So essentially with Eames, any monies that are not appropriated or that are not expended actually go back to the governor's office. The money comes to us through the governor's office, so we are actually not the holders per se of the fund, so we couldn't make that decision.
Okay, so in other states, they're passing legislation that those funds go to GEARS and be restricted for non-public schools. So I'll work the legislative end, but just wanted to pose the question. And then the second question about Eames, it seems that there's some inconsistency in what's approved and what's not approved. So for one school, they may have approved internet service so that
or hotspots or whatever. And then in another school, they submit the same request and they're denied. Is there a reason that there's?
I'm sure there is a reason. It usually depends, and this is just off the cuff of what I'm thinking of. It depends on the justification and where they made the link to that particular expenditure in those broad areas of allowability. That's usually where something happens, where something could be deemed not necessarily allowable, and in another case, it could be allowable. It's the manner in which they described it to us and how they're going to use it and what it actually links to.
So it's semantics?
Sometimes.
Okay. And there's still, are you only allowing that 3-day window for appeals, or is that window extended? Because
No, that window is still the same. Our contractor that works with us, PNN, that you all know of, who actually reviews the applications, that's the policy we put in place initially, and so that is the one that they're honoring.
okay, because some schools don't log in, especially during the summer. They're not logging into the portal every day. Some of my leaders are not 12-month employees. And when they get back to the portal and they see that they've been denied, they've already missed the 3-day window to appeal. It just seems a bit unfair that maybe 3 days from the time you open that portal and you see the denial versus 3 days from when it's posted.
Well, what I can do is take it back to the group and see if there's something. Now, I know specifically with this particular round, we made it a point to get summer contacts, and it was for that purpose, because the volume of what they're reviewing this time is very different. So we know that the cursor Eames allocations were a lot smaller and different in volume as far as requests versus art Eames. And so it is taking them a longer period of time to review those applications. And sometimes they do have to discuss things of allowability with us to make sure we're all on the same page. But I will take that concern back to see if there's any adjustment. Do you know those particular leaders who had that specific issue?
I can get those names.
Okay, if you could get that and send it to me, that may help me in my
And I was just wondering if there was going to be one final, allowable appeal for, because exactly what you said, principals are figuring out that, oh, you wrote this for your rationale, I wrote this, they denied me, they approved you. So I'm gonna go back and try to appeal it and revise my rationale so that I can improve. My fear is that there will be a tremendous amount of money left on the table because we didn't use the right wording to link the rationale with the item requested. So my thought was so that that money doesn't go unspent and that the children are served appropriately, that there would be one final appeal that we could go in, and now that we know the game, we can adjust our application, our rationale for those items that we may have been denied to improve our chances of being approved and receiving those things. So just something to take back for discussion.
And the thing about it is that's our concern as well, because it is a huge amount of funding. And we want to make sure that and that's why we have those discussions with PNN around allowability on certain things, because from their perspective, sometimes they don't get it from an educational standpoint, and so they always run them by us to make a final
That was
decision.
one of my fears, that the people reviewing these applications are not educators, and because they don't sit in that seat, not their fault, they just don't understand or make the connections.
And that's the purpose, we have a weekly meeting with them, so believe me, we go over all of those things that they point out to say, this doesn't look right to us, what do you all think about it? And so that's kind of a protocol that we've established, so we don't run into that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I just want the money to be used for the purposes for which it was intended, and that's to support students and teachers and learning in our schools.
Absolutely. That's the reason we said too, initially when they were making the application, ask for everything you want.
Right.
Because there may be a case where you may be able to get additional things because somebody else, were disallowed in some areas, and so that we wanted to leave that flexibility to be able to handle it.
And I'm gonna jump in here because we did that, and our applications were due maybe July 5th last year for Eames, and we were approved for lots of things. And I think at 2 of our previous meetings, we talked about the fact that some of our softwares have still not been implemented in our schools, ebooks, for example, in our schools. So after our discussions, it's been much more streamlined and so wonderful and so easy to work with your team that you have in place now. However, my concern is, over the summer, this morning, as a matter of fact, with some of our ebooks, things have been received and approved and paid through SHI for Eames, but now we're only approved for 2 years, so we missed that first year altogether. So we talked about at our last meeting the possibility of taking that year 3 that we missed, not our fault and not anyone's fault, just lack of continuity and people in place to take care of the software portion. Wondering if that 3rd year could be sent out to our schools as requested last year at this time.
Well, that would have been for person needs, and the problem with that is probably that the funds may not be good long enough for that to be able to happen. So that's the issue we run into, because remember, person needs is gonna end a year before our needs is gonna end. And so we get into an issue of us being able to expend the funds in a timely manner. So that becomes the problem there. And it's unfortunate.
It's personnel. You guys have personnel in place to make it all happen and to communicate
the IT team handled all the IT stuff.
Right,
so
and it's not anybody's fault.
Yeah.
It's just that we worked hard to get everything submitted and all the hardware things came, the hand sanitizer and all the other things. But the software is what our kids really needed, the ebooks. And we're just, as of this morning, receiving lots of those. But it's only for 2 years and not for 3. So if you're able to discuss that and push that forward a year, I would certainly appreciate that. I know that it was possible at our last meeting. You said you would talk about it and bring it up for discussion. So if that's possible, that would certainly be appreciated.
Okay, definitely. I think Carol is back now. Carol Mosley for EdTech. So we definitely try to have that.
Thank you. And the process is so wonderful. It's so much easier to work with. There's a they make it so much better, and I so appreciate your efforts and the hard work that's gone into that. But we still missed a whole year.
Yeah, and it's
a lot of money.
And it's unfortunate because that's the same situation we run into with contracts, and just Dr. McGill, which is over here, who negotiates those contracts with the non-public schools. In some situations, we cannot circumvent our procurement rules, and they allow us maximums on up to purchases or up to contract amounts that would sometimes require an RFP. An RFP can take an entire year to do it. Then you're not guaranteed that you get the vendor you wanted to get initially. So you lose a year in the process, and then you only have a year left to be able to use the funds. So unfortunately, we have those issues. When they issued this down for the state to handle this process, they didn't realize that the state doesn't handle these type of processes. And so there just wasn't the infrastructure and capacity in place to be able to do some of these things. Initially, the reason we had to outsource the PNN, it was no way that this could have been implemented in the timeline that the feds gave us without some support from outside. But thank you for that. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. We're glad that, look, we're able to
It's working now.
on the back end. But I will take those 2 concerns, okay?
2 questions. We received approval for some expenses and of course denial for some. And I just wanted to know for like the software and things like that, when could we expect that to arrive? Because we submitted quotes from the companies and everything.
So are you speaking of art means?
Yes.
Okay. So some of those applications are still actually in review. So they weren't going to start procurement on any of that until July 1. So the teams will, once all of the applications have been reviewed, and I think they have about 15 left in review. The procurement side will then begin to handle the tech and non-tech items, so moving them out. But we weren't going to do it until the new fiscal year anyway, just because they were going to be closed out and you weren't going to be able to get the software items.
So school starts August 12th.
Yes, and Carol, I know for IT items, she is going to work to try to get most of them to you.
The software?
Yes.
Okay.
She's going to work to try to get most of those to you because she knows you want some for when school begins. So her team really works around the clock to try to make that happen.
And then the second question, if you had an appeal for certain items, does that hold up the whole thing, or can they go ahead with the things that were approved?
No, they will, until a notice of allowable cost, a full notice is issued to you, then your information won't be transferred to the procurement team so they can begin those processes.
So if we submitted an appeal 3 weeks ago and you haven't heard anything, what's a good deadline for that?
You probably should have heard something by now on an appeal. Do you have a school name?
Bethany Christian School?
That you be, okay.
Yeah,
can check
and I
into that
did
one.
send them an email, info.
Can you tell me in particular what you were appealing? It might be something that we reviewed.
It was some outdoor equipment.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
we've had some conversations about outdoor equipment, so
Yeah.
that was probably one of the ones that are part of the conversation, but we made some decisions on those, so
Okay.
I'll definitely reach out and check.
So the software, you think it'll be available by mid-August?
I can't
You
guarantee
can't,
that,
okay.
but I can get with Carol and see if they have any estimates of when you might start to begin to receive items.
I have vendors that are contacting me because we submitted the quotes, and they're just following up saying, can you sign this? And I'm like, no, I can't sign this.
Right.
Yeah, it's like anything. And so I've kind of referred them to our page that we received of allowable costs, where it says approved. And so I'm hoping that they'll give us some kind of little provisional access until it can be approved or paid for.
And in terms of gear, I do want to share with you on our ombudsman call not too long ago, what a lot of the private schools are doing across the country, in that is what's going to happen with the funds going back to the governor. They're encouraging their private schools to reach out to whoever their contact is to start discussing that, or possibly setting up some sessions to talk about what are some of the possibilities or things that you may want to do or what your needs are. So you may want to look at that and see what's going on in that term.
Okay. All right, well, thank you all. We appreciate your patience and your just willingness to kind of support the effort as well. So thank you to you all.
Thank you. Kimberly has this is an appropriate. Can we do additional? She wants to suggest something for the agenda for September.
So there's been ongoing conversations with the department about the alternate pathway for our special needs high school graduates, and being able to put those applied codes into the STS system. And it's kind of stalled at every turn. Raynell's office, Dr. Houston's office, and my office have been working on it. But I think with staff turnovers and just some lack of communication, so we're just hoping to get some kind of resolution for that, so that we can move forward. You can reach out to me, I can give you some of the documentation we've had in ongoing conversations.
Do you want this as an item on September?
Yes, please.
Yes.
And I have a request. Daphne always includes her contact information, which is so helpful, because when I go back to my diocese, when my admin team could copy these slides, and if we could have the person that spoke to us that day, their email and number, that would be a huge help.
The department is also developing protocols for presentations and slide decks and so forth, and that is one of the newest requirements in their protocols.
Anybody else? Yes.
Yeah, this is my first meeting with this group, so I'm not familiar with the procedures or whatnot, but I didn't hear any reference to opportunities for public comment. I'm just curious about how that works with this group.
The cards at the
There's
table.
cards over there. There's nobody.
Okay.
You may turn in a card.
Would you like to make it?
Yeah, could I
Yeah.
fill out a card and make it?
Yes. We'll let you see.
Yeah, so just real quick, last year, I had asked LDOE to conduct a survey statewide to give us some sense of what the teacher shortage looked like. And they did that, they came back and they estimated 2,500 vacancies in the public school sector. I was curious if you guys did anything similar, and what you think your current status is with regard to teacher vacancies.
I think statewide, we have not done something.
We haven't done it statewide. I mean, we do it each entity.
So I'm just curious, how big a problem is that for you, for the non-public group? Is that a huge problem, or it's just kind of the same every year, or?
No, it's since the pandemic, for us, since the pandemic, it's been much worse. And our rural schools are the ones that are really suffering.
Right.
Well, the public schools have started adding significant
Yeah.
sign-on bonuses. And they just seem to be flush with cash right now, and that's,
We don't have the cash.
right. I mean, we,
But what
We
I'm
are
hearing is you don't have a quantifiable measure right now of what that looks
No, we
like.
don't.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Just kind of, Ronnie, that's a common thing. Right now, I need a math teacher at St. Mary's in Anchorage, and it's just almost unheard to find. The public schools are in need, and they can offer $40,000. They took 2 of my 4th grade teachers last Monday, that I just lined up in a small, one of my schools, and now only God knows who I'll find. But it's tough. I don't think it's quite as bad as the public system, but we have problems. We have problems, especially in those higher mathematics, science, those high level courses.
Mr. Hightower tried to recruit me to teach physics, so I wasn't sure how bad it was, so, until that moment.
We don't have an opening in Catholic, but we would make one for lunch.
It's a struggle. And
Is there a mechanism for doing a statewide survey of non-public schools?
I guess we could put something together.
I think that would be great to get that data.
Say that again?
Is there a mechanism for doing a statewide survey of non-public schools around any kind of issue, but this particular issue, which is teacher shortages in the non-public system?
I can pass it to my manager.
Yeah.
One more question. We're having issues with kids facing terminal grade in scholarships, who are on state scholarship. They're leaving elementary school, trying to go to high school, to Catholic high school, on state scholarship, and they have to re-enter the lottery. We're trying to find where in policy and law it states that a terminal grade student has to re-enter the lottery, because the way that we have interpreted the policy and law is that they are eligible to continue the 12th grade without going back into the lottery. So can you bring that question to the team and have them point and send that policy or law and send that to us? Because what I have, I can send to you.
Okay.
That basically says they should not, it doesn't state that they have to go through the lottery as a terminal grade. Right. And this is something we've been talking about for years, particularly for me. If they're leaving a Catholic elementary school, they want to go to Catholic high school on state scholarship, since we're a system, why do they have to?
Part of that is because our system doesn't connect, like the system we use doesn't automatically connect it to where they can just roll over from one location to the other, it's site them, right? So part of the reason they have to apply is so we know where to send them, right? So that's part of the issue, why they have to apply.
Could we address it as a transfer if they're continuing students? Just for discussion.
Yeah, okay.
We can figure out how to maybe attack it before we start the application process.
Yeah, okay. And that is something we consider with like system upgrades, like how convenient is possible. I think the participation guide on our website says right now that they don't have to provide eligibility documents when they're applying from a terminal grade to the high school.
The problem is my parents, some of them won't do the paperwork.
Got it.
You know, and so that's what gets them, and then the child suffers because, you know.
Yeah, we get those calls, and that's something we definitely trying to hash out, like system-wide, like how to do that, and like policy-wise as well.
Okay. I look forward to it.
Okay.
I have some national data on that.
Anything else?
Independent schools I'll send you.
Okay, good luck. We begin a new school year. Looks like the news media wants to kind of panic us because they want to say that COVID numbers are up. But I'm sure that all of you in your school systems will do the same. As if someone's sick, they stay home. But I think, you know, we have done a wonderful job in our schools, in our non-public schools, that we did not skip a beat. And so, you know, I think school leaders don't hear that enough. And, you know, I think that, you know, we need to promote that even more. But again, you know, good luck. And we'll see you in September the 20th is our next meeting. Hopefully we'll have a few things on the agenda because New Orleans has an administrators conference beginning that afternoon for administrators conference. So we don't want to stay too long next on the 20th because we want to get to Shaggy's before the meeting starts. And I know I'm being filmed. So I'm sure somebody's going to say that lady that leads that non-public school needs to be removed.
I won't be here for that meeting. I will be in.
Well, we know that you're hosting, yes, you will get a jump on us.
Yes.
So safe travels.
Again.
Safe travels, and those of you who don't cross the basin are very fortunate because starting August the 1st, they will take a picture of us as we get up on the basin. And if we're more than 18 minutes, our picture will be taken on the next side and we will be given a citation. So I'm gonna go 190. I'm not fooling with all that. Good luck and have safe travels home. Motion to adjourn, we adjourn. Giving you good, Nikki?